Start. All right. Hi, everyone. Thank you very much for joining this Mayor's Question Time. My name is Ramsey, and I was the editor of the Hackney Gazette for a few years. I'm here with the Mayor of Hackney, who is Phil Glanville. And I'm just going to start by explaining a little bit about how this evening's going to run. Hi, everyone. Thank you very much for joining this Mayor's Question Time. My name is Ramsey, and we've got an audio issue, sorry. For a few years. I'm here with the Mayor of Hackney, who is Phil Glanville. Okay, so for those of you watching, I just stopped talking because we were getting the meeting played back to us, not in real time, but that's now been sorted out, so apologies for that. Okay, so I'm just going to explain the format of the evening for everyone who's watching at home. So we're going to start off, the event is 2 hours long, give or take. We're going to start off with some questions that have been pre-submitted by people. There are 9 of those questions that I'll get through. So in each case, I will invite the questioner to read out their question, or if they're not here, or if they'd rather not speak themselves, I will put their question to the Mayor because I've got them all here. The Mayor will answer, and I will then invite the questioner, if they're here, to respond with could be a follow-up question, could be a follow-up thought they've thought of, but and in either case, the whole question will take 5 minutes. So that's me reading the question or you reading the question, the mayor answering, and then the response. So 5 minutes in total for each of those blocks. After those 9 questions, we will then open the floor, open the floor for more questions. So if you've not had a chance to pre-submit a question, but you want to ask a question, that's the time to do it. Anybody who's planning to take part in either part of the evening, so either the pre-submitted questions or the questions from the floor afterwards, if you're planning to take part in those, please enable your audio now. And if you'd like to enable your video as well, you can, but that's not compulsory. It's up to you if you'd like to be seen or not. And I will invite you to speak when ready. There's a list down the side of the screen that I can see, but my vision is not very good. So if I mispronounce a name or squint weirdly into the middle distance, that is why. So there's a similar format for the second half for the questions from people from the floor. It will be 5 minutes in total for each block. You'll ask it. The mayor will respond. There'll be a chance for a follow-up, keeping to within the 5-minute time period. Anybody we don't get to who's got a question in the second half, the council will take a note of your question after the meeting, and a written response will be provided to you. But just to be clear, I've not been told who to choose, so I will be pretty much choosing questions in, as far as I can tell, the order they come up in. So there's no kind of grand plan from the council there. I'm not been told who to choose. So the rules of the evening, as far as there are those, encourage. I know that's a note to me. I am encouraging. Please be patient with each other and with the questions and the answers. Please be polite. And the most important thing is please stick to the timeframes. I will give you a 1-minute warning when we are through 4 minutes of the 5-minute block for each question. You will be switched off if you go over because we have to get through everyone's questions. So it's in everyone's interest if you just really try and keep it to within that frame. 5 minutes is a long time, so we should be okay. And please be mindful the event is being filmed. Obviously you're watching because it's being streamed live on the council's YouTube page. It will also stay there for people to watch in perpetuity, which is great news for all of us. I'll now hand over to the mayor to say a few words.
Thanks, Ramsey, and thank you for everyone that's joining us and have submitted questions. Ramsey and I were due to do this in March 2020 in person in the Town Hall Council chamber, and sadly COVID and the first lockdown prevented that happening. We've done 2 of these before. They're one part of the ways that I think that I've opened up the council to greater accountability and also the Office of Mayor to greater accountability. So we've done 2 before. This is our 3rd. I hope we'll get 1 more in before the election, and that will be in person. But we've also done some collaborations with Hackney Gazette, the Hackney Citizen. We've done the Grill Phil that takes place on Twitter after every major full council meeting. And I also get questioned in a select committee style way by our scrutiny commission. Obviously, we've seen some of that today with Dominic Cummings' evidence in Parliament. I've got some reflections on kind of where we've been. We have to be really clear. It's been an incredibly difficult 18 months for the council and for the staff that work in the public sector, key workers who've been maintaining services out there in our communities and making sure that we keep Hackney residents safe. We've lost members of our staff community. Only last week, I went to Anne Taylor, which is a nursery and children's centre in London Fields, where we're marking the loss of Lilla, who'd worked there for, I think, nearly over 10 years. And I know that was felt really tight in the community there at the children's centre. We've lost 493 Hackney residents during this pandemic. We've seen huge economic shocks. There are challenges around mental health, isolation, poverty, furlough, unemployment, no doubt still to come. So it's a really challenging time that we take part in this question time, and I'm really keen to touch on some of those issues and themes. I think there's some hope as well. We're starting to obviously see our economy open again. We've been doing what we can as a council to support our economy. We've had just come from a Walk to School week where we were showcasing some of the work that we've done to rebuild a greener Hackney, and it was lovely to meet school communities and young people that were benefiting from some of those interventions around air quality. I'm really excited as well that, whether it was at Cabinet on Monday evening when we're announcing some of our capital investment, but some of the visits I've been doing to businesses and the Britannia Leisure Centre as well, that will be opening at the end of June, that we've got some really important capital projects that show our commitment to continue to invest in the borough's infrastructure, but making sure that we rebuild that better Hackney that people want to see. People don't want to go back, I don't think, to how things were, and whether it's on transport infrastructure, the borough's infrastructure in general, making sure that we make those long-term investments is really important. There is a backdrop to all of this, though, and that is, I think, the resilience within the public sector is a lot lower than it has been. People have been, whether they're in the NHS, whether in the council, working incredibly hard, leadership teams within our schools. But there's still some really significant financial pressure faced by the council. And so there's some difficult, as there always is, budget decisions to come. There's still ongoing austerity when it comes to local government. And one of my jobs over the course of this year will be continuing to advocate that we can't see the services that have got us through this pandemic slashed to pay for it, and a return to this sort of austerity that we've seen over the previous decade. So while I'm hopeful about the future, I'm really hopeful about the borough's resilience. We've seen a huge amount of community activity, volunteering, energy, giving back to our communities. And I think that the people of Hackney have got us through this. I can't pretend there aren't challenges still to come, but I just thank everyone, whether they work for the public sector, whether in local business, whether they've been volunteering, for the contribution they've made to getting us to this point. And I hope that with the vaccine and with the recovery that we're starting to see, that we can rebuild that better Hackney that we've been talking about.
Cool. Thanks very much. Okay, so let's crack on with what you folks at home wanted to ask. So the first question is from Graham Woodruff. Apologies in advance if I mispronounce anybody's name during the course of this. I will do my best to get them right. It's about the cyber attack. So Graham, are you here and would you like to ask your question?
Yes, I'm here. Yeah.
Okay, please go ahead.
Thanks. Thanks for doing this session. It's really good. I was just wanting to ask, as a Hackney resident, I am concerned that my personal data is now in the hands of criminals because of the cyber attack over 8 months ago. Does the Mayor now know what the personal data was stolen? And if so, when will he publish the full extent of the data breach?
Phil, do you want to reply?
Well, thanks, Graham. And I think you had wanted to ask this question at full council a couple of months ago, and it's a really important question. I'm going to just start a little bit for people that don't know or understand the cyber attack about sort of what happened. So in October last year, the council suffered a serious cyber attack. It had a huge impact on what we euphemistically call our legacy systems, but anything that was hosted on a council server that's based on a platform that the council hosts on its servers. We had good cyber security, but obviously they got through that and were able to make the attack that they did. They also, when they attacked us, started to delete our backup systems. We managed to prevent all of our backup systems being lost, and that access to data that is obviously critical to how the council operates. Some data was obviously stolen. I'll come back to Graham's core point on that in a second. We were lucky, though, in a sense that we had built a lot of cloud-based systems. So I talk euphemistically of the council being a sort of Google council, but the fundamental ways the council communicates with its residents, the way it communicates internally, the platforms that allow us to answer the phone, that allow us to maintain our website, that allow us to communicate with each other, the web forms that allow people to now reorder, recycling, those sorts of platforms, we were very lucky, were cloud-based and were not affected by the attack. There were other places, other institutions, I'm not going to list a set of names, where they haven't had that resilience and they haven't been able to recover. We're obviously, we're now 9 to 10 months into that attack. And it's fair to say it takes a long time to rebuild those systems. If you imagine it as a generic system, so you've got data, you've got a platform, you've got a service it's going to provide, you lose the platform and you lose access to your data. You can't provide that service. To recover that service, you've got to rebuild a system. So in the case of land charges or our work on social care or the electoral register, you've got to rebuild that system, and then you've got to populate it with a data set. There are some data sets that we've been able to recover completely and some that we were able to recover partially. So what we did around the elections, we had an electoral database. We knew who had registered for a postal vote. We didn't have access to the signatures that keeps that system secure. Those signatures weren't necessarily stolen, we just didn't have access to them. We were able to, with our residents, get a platform back up, rebuild that. That was relatively simple.
Just mindful of time, sorry. Is it possible to move on to the what was stolen question?
So what was stolen? So at the start of this year, the people that made that attack decided to publish data on the dark web. We have been through that data and have been very clear that if we haven't contacted you, your data and the type of data that's been released is not likely to have been either released or likely to have a material impact on you. So we have contacted people that did see their data published. We have been working with the police, with the National Cyber Security Centre, making sure that we triage that data in the right way, and that either police or the council contacts you if you have been put at risk or your data has been seriously put at risk. There was a whole range of data stolen from some of our community safety data, and that has obviously been through that triage process, and we've reached out all the way through to estate maps, JPEG files, things that were not meaningful at all. And would have no impact on a Hackney resident. The one thing to also say from the very, very start is the key financial systems where people's financial records were stored in relation to things like council tax, payments, and all of those things, were not as impacted by the attack, and all the evidence suggests were not stolen or published.
So just to get to the end of that bit, so you're saying you do know what personal data was stolen. And the second part of the question was, when will you publish the full extent of that, or are you going to publish the full extent of a list of what was stolen?
We're probably not going to publish a list of everything that's stolen that could put people at risk. What we have been doing is going through that data, giving an indication of it and contacting people that need it. I think when that process is totally complete and we're in a better position when we've recovered systems, then we might be able to publish a full list. We also work with the National Criminal agencies to ensure that that data was also removed from the dark web. And what we do not want to do is anything that would tip off criminals around that data, direct people to it, or fully indicate its extent.
That's good.
But we do want to make sure that we're reassuring residents that if they've been personally impacted, or staff indeed, that we would be contacting them and allowing them to take the action that they might need.
All right, thank you for that. Graham, that took up the 5 minutes, unfortunately, but you've got a follow-up question that you submitted in writing. That will be put to the council and they will give you a response to that second part in writing. Just for the interest of time, I've got to be on to the next person.
That's right.
I will probably hurry you along a little bit if you're giving too much bump, because I don't want to stop your questions getting in the way. So the second question is from Will Petty. Will, are you here, and would you like to ask the question yourself? It looks like a no. Okay, so I will ask the question for you. So Will Petty says, getting more people cycling is important for meeting Hackney's climate change commitments, but building a proper main road cycling network is hampered by the way control of the roads is split between the boroughs and Transport for London. In the interest of building a more coordinated cycle network, would you support boroughs, including Hackney, handing control of more of their main roads over to TfL? So would you support giving more main roads to TfL?
I'm going to give a very straight answer to this question. No, I wouldn't support that. I think for a couple of reasons. Obviously, we're passionate about active and sustainable travel in Hackney. The TLRN, the Transport for London Road Network, which is the main roads, the red routes, the critical infrastructure for not just cycling, but our town centres, walking, cars, deliveries, taxis, buses, all of that is maintained by TfL, and they do that in a way that obviously maintains it for all Londoners, and they've got strategic priorities that go way beyond Hackney. TfL is a great organisation. Obviously, ultimately, it's held to account by the Mayor of London and the Assembly, but it can feel quite remote sometimes. And I think the roads that we might be talking about, so like the B and C roads, some of the other A roads in the borough, moving them over to TfL, you lose that direct connection and accountability. And I think some of the things that, this is not a one-sided debate. People that will be debating cycle routes, they'll be debating LTNs, they'll be debating all of these sorts of interventions. I think the more remote you make the people running it, the less local knowledge, impact, co-design that you can do. And I think for me, there is the right mix between a really strong relationship between our transport team working with TfL, thinking about those main routes and making sure that they're as safe as they can be. So we're collaborating on Vision Zero, which is making our junctions safer. And it would be fair to say that I think we've done good work with our own funding and TfL funding around some of those main routes. So highly aspirational when it comes to narrowing Seven Sisters Road and ultimately seeing protected cycling there while maintaining the bus links. We delivered Wick Road, which is a segregated main road. We've just done the Green Lane scheme, and we are utterly committed to sorting out the sometimes quite alienating main roads like the gyratories and how things in Hackney Wick can feel even outside here in the town hall. They are collaborations between the council and TfL. I've also said that I think that I'm a big fan of our quiet ways. I'm a big fan of how you connect things into communities and neighbourhoods. And actually, I think CS1 is quite a successful cycling route. And if the underpinning of this question is things like Hackney Road or the A10, and whether the best way to improve active travel, improve the safety, is to sort of see all of those main routes with cycle tracks on, I think that's a challenge for me. I think what is better is a more iterative, localized approach that tackles things like speed and safety and collaboration. And I don't think the one-size-fits-all approach of having everything under TfL will be the right one.
So do you not, for the sake of the premise of the question, do you not agree, therefore, that the splitting of the roads between the boroughs and TfL is hampering building an integrated network?
Not at all. Not at all. No, I think what's hampering further progress is, frankly, the fact that the government doesn't invest properly in London's transport system, that TfL is overly reliant on tube fares to do all of the work that it does around buses and cycling and active travel. Car owners in London pay vehicle excise duty. That money doesn't actually return to London either for the TfL or for London boroughs. So there can be quite a lot of frustration, I think, about the quality of the infrastructure. And so for me, I don't think we have missed out on any infrastructure. There aren't opportunities that we aren't taking to improve safety for pedestrians, car users, bus users, cyclists.
So hypothetically, would you support giving, I understand what you're saying about Hackney's roads, but maybe boroughs that are less in favour of building what you see as good cycle infrastructure. So you also wouldn't support TfL taking control of their main roads either. You'd rather see them.
I believe in devolving power to local levels and boroughs, and I think it can be really frustrating if you live in a borough where active travel isn't taken as seriously as it is in Hackney, where infrastructure gets removed in a way that you feel doesn't support that. I know, though, that Will, Norman, Heidi, Sadiq, they push those boroughs harder. They've challenged some of those decisions, and that's absolutely right. But in the same way that I wouldn't tell another borough what what sort of infrastructure to install, I think centralising that in City Hall is probably not the right decision. It's collaboration. They aspiration set by the Mayor of London is really important, but they have to work with London boroughs.
Sure. Okay. Thank you very much for that question, Will. The third question is from Louise Wilcox. My understanding is Louise is not here. That looks to be correct. So it is about public transport improvement. So Louise asks, what's happening with public transport? What improvements can we look forward to?
So public transport is incredibly important to a borough like Hackney, where you have historic levels of car ownership, so fewer than roughly a third of Hackney residents have a private car access to it. So we're a borough built on walking, cycling and buses traditionally. We've seen obviously that investment in the overground that has transformed how people access the borough and our local economy. And I'm really pleased that Hackney is continuing to support the overground, absolutely critical. So we fought obviously a couple of years ago to maintain staffing and ticket offices and that infrastructure. We wanted more of the network under TfL and the overground rather than just DFT and private companies. One of the biggest announcements we've recently made in public transport in terms of Hackney has been the new station entrance at Hackney Central. Anyone that's used Hackney Central will know it's not only overcrowded, but it can be really dangerous if you're a vulnerable user on the ramp and a train has just pulled into the station and everyone's getting off, and to fight your way to the station. So new station platform there. We're continuing to want to make accessibility at the new station at Hackney Wick a priority, so investing there. There's long-term plans to make Hackney Downs station in its entirety fully accessible. We continue to back those, and we want to get Stamford Hill in Zone 2 and truly accessible. So an affordability question and an accessibility question. Kingsland, Dalston Kingsland was going to be made accessible, one of our busiest stations in our town centre if Crossrail 2 had come. Yeah. Crossrail 2 has been delayed partly by some of the financial challenges that I talked about earlier. And frankly, I think the government's holding us a little bit to ransom in London around some of that infrastructure. So I think we need an interim solution to make sure that we get an accessible Dalston Kingsland. We still want to see, obviously, Crossrail 2 come here at some point. Buses, though.
Are there any, sorry, just before you get on to buses, are there any timescales you can point to for any of those improvements you've talked about, accessibility, etc.? So
on site with Hackney Central very shortly. Yeah. Still pushing TfL and Network Rail around Stamford Hill. Yeah. And I think that Hackney Downs has been committed to, but we don't have a start date for that. When it comes to Dalston Kingsland, a much longer campaign, and really emphasising that if it's not going to come in terms of Crossrail 2 shortly, we just can't carry on like that. We also pushed and got obviously more regular service on our overground. On buses, supporting our buses is incredibly important. So we fought obviously route changes. We've been supporting bus lanes, making them 24-hour. We want to expand the protection for our bus lanes. A lot of our single-decker buses are really important as well for connectivity. So we're looking at how we can better support them. Some of them are benefiting from LTNs, others might be more challenged by them, but there's things we can do around junction layout, parking, and smoothing those journeys and making sure that people feel confident. I think one of the challenges at the moment is safety. I think TfL has been really positive on cleaning and making sure that buses and our other public transport is safe. But we want to make sure as well that it continues to see that investment. There's still some not spots as well when it comes to buses. The regularity of buses in the east of the borough is really challenging. So we've been talking to TfL, to the LLDC, to businesses there to improve the network around that and making sure that continues. In my role at London Councils, I'm also really clear that any route changes, any further reductions in bus services need to be done with the boroughs, and the boroughs and communities are listened to, because buses are incredibly important to that. But you know, we are making all the investment that we can in our finite resources to support TfL and support both our bus, overground and tube network.
What do you mean by expanding protection for bus lanes?
So buses used to operate, bus lanes, many of the bus lanes in the borough only operated 7 till 7. Yeah. Some are now 24 hours. That's good for cycling and it's good for the regularity and the reliability of buses. We know people want to have confidence in their bus systems. When Dalston Junction was going through the really prolonged, disruptive works that was having an impact on buses, so it can be junction timings, traffic lights. There's still though some bus lanes that haven't gone 24-hour, and I think that's really, really important. And there are also extensions to bus lanes. So some of the challenges on Graham Road, we've been able to extend the bus lane, sort out some of the issues around traffic light timings, and just improve that section for bus users.
Cool. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, we've got another question from somebody who I believe is not present yet. So it's from Marcus Murphy, and it's about honouring the borough's Irish community. So the question is, Marcus says, I feel it is important to honour each community that has played a part in Hackney's long history. The Irish played a large role in the community for a long time, yet we are rarely mentioned or acknowledged as a discrete community. What do you think about something to rectify this?
Well, I think all of our work to celebrate our diverse communities and backgrounds in Hackney often comes from the community itself, and it's only ever amplified by the council. So I don't think our work with the LGBTQI plus community, when we set out on our journey around sort of Hackney 365, it was like, we want to do more with you, but we don't have all the answers and we don't necessarily fully understand what you would like to see. Okay. So what I think we've rightly been focused on quite a lot around Brexit and EU nationals and staying a welcoming, inclusive borough. Irish citizens, while they obviously have a slightly different relationship with the UK, were very much represented in that discussion within our own workforce and saying, you know, the EU 27 are all welcome here, all 40,000, and we'd want to continue. In terms of census, I don't think that's useful in terms of capturing the levels of the Irish community in Hackney, because I know that, like the Windrush generation, people came to London and they built this city. Mm-hmm. They built this borough, and the political representation that they had, the campaigning that we've done around civil rights. I know some passionate Irish nationalists in Hackney that you know, campaigned on things like the Birmingham Six and those things. Indeed, former councillor Sally Mulready serves on the Irish President's Council, and I know that some of our work around COVID has not ignored the Irish community. So our Community Champions Network, working with Irish elders, making sure they've got the information to stay safe, the humanitarian support, to get vaccinated and be supported, has been really invaluable. So I've seen the Irish community represented in those discussions about keeping the borough safe. I think in terms of St. Patrick's Day, in terms of seeing more visibility, more cultural references, so much of that has gone into abeyance. You know, in Stoke Newington, there's some incredible Irish venues. Irish culture is celebrated there, often part of Stoke Newington, both literary and music festivals. I've attended those events, the council supports them. We would want more diversity in Carnival when it starts. So my pushback to sort of Marcus would be, how can we get involved? How can we tap into some of those networks? How can we amplify them? Because I think we've learned a lot through COVID. We've learned a lot through our work on Windrush and EU nationals. And one of our Rebuilding Hackney kind of plans and ideas is to invest more in our cultural sector to help it recover. That will be with the community, and it will be open, it will be grant-based, it will be trying to match artists with venues and institutions and the community beyond that, and seeing when it's safe to do so, a real recovery in culture. So there is huge opportunity for people from Irish communities, either more recent or more established in Hackney, to be a full part of that. And I wouldn't want any part of the borough or any community in the borough to feel kind of excluded from that work as well. And you know, the contribution is manifest.
Okay. There's just a minute or so left of this bit. There's a second section that Marcus has submitted, which is more of a statement, I think, that he wants you to respond to. Recently, the Irish president was speaking about the cultural effects the Great Hunger had on the Irish diaspora and how it saw us spread out across Britain and elsewhere. This is Marcus saying this. The Irish feel in many ways invisible, as I know from talking to older people like my father or surviving older relatives. We feel like a community which is not British, but treated as such at times for the sake of convenience, without considering what makes us a distinct cultural group. I put it to the mayor that just as the evils of slavery cannot and should not be ignored, neither should past imperial acts of misgovernment, which affected the ancestors of many people living in the UK today from my own community. How do you respond to that?
Well, I think the being challenged and being comfortable with being more uncomfortable about our shared history is incredibly important. You know, the empire, imperialism shaped the nations of Great Britain and Ireland and their communities, and obviously had deep impacts in Ireland itself and created diasporas in the same way that our imperial legacy, whether it's around slavery or partition in India, did. And I think Hackney's archive service, the political leadership, have been really open to making sure that those stories are uncovered and where, you know, the work that we've done around reclaiming, rename and renewing, review, rename, reclaim, doesn't stop just with slavery. And I think the naming hub and recognising the contribution of people that have come to Hackney, delivered change, stories that have never been told, that was for everyone. It started in a place around slavery, absolutely, because that was the debate we were having. It's really important. We were challenged on it, but it does not end there.
Because it's important. There is a full answer, I think, Marcus, which will be shared with you, but I wanted to get a flavour of that in for people because it's an important question.
Absolutely, time to be involved.
Okay, so next question. Again, I think from somebody who's not present. No, I can't see the list. It's from Lewis Blank. And the question is, it's a straightforward one. Why have you continued to allow expensive developments in Hackney to push the rental market up by 200%?
Well, I don't fully accept the premise of the question from Lewis. I think we have to split this into three distinct parts, and I'll try and take this through it really quickly. On us being a campaigning council and challenging affordability, I think we've been really resolute. You know, we've challenged the unaffordability in the private rented sector, asking for whether it's letting agent fees, rent stabilisation, and now rent controls, the end of Section 21, always at the forefront of that campaign with renters. And we know that private rents drive homelessness. So we want the powers, we want the Mayor of London to have the powers, we want to shape and dampen that private rental market, absolutely resolutely. We've also campaigned against all of the Tory government housing reforms of the last decade and the ones underway at the moment. They've constantly sought to dilute our planning powers. Now, I know there'll be people watching today that don't think we're tough enough in planning, don't think that we're always on the right side around development and change, but we have to operate in a framework that the presumption within the planning system is in favour of development, and in terms of that development, that while we can shape it in terms of the proportion that is affordable, it has to be viable. And we went for a period when Mayor Johnson was obviously Mayor of London, where he also sought to dilute what was meant by affordable. We spoke out against starter homes, we speak out against first homes, we speak out against permitted development rights. We believe in social and council housing is the only form of affordable housing that should, you know, we defended that in the planning system. The trouble is the government ultimately arbitrate at national level about the planning system, and they can say things that are unaffordable in Hackney are affordable. And we still have to allow them. So I think there's that whole campaign policy, and it's about to get worse, reducing the role for us as a planning authority. And we are only a planning authority. As mayor, I cannot stop any development. I have no power over that whatsoever.
So you say developments the council, that do come to the council approves, that they need to be viable. What do you mean by that for people who are
So
watching?
a developer can come and say that they want to build, let's say, 100 homes, and within that site they have to re-provide employment space. They've got to help fund our infrastructure, so schools, things like that, affordable workspace, and then they can only provide 20 affordable houses. That is very frustrating for me, very frustrating for planning committee, planning officers, the decision. If they can prove that through a viability process that we independently check, then they're allowed to get that developed. Now, the good things are 35%, 50% are in the London plan. The Mayor of London stands behind boroughs when they reject schemes for not being good enough. That wasn't the case before. So there are real better levers now. But within that 20%, that isn't 20% social housing as I would want, or 30% social housing, or even 50% social housing. They're allowed to bring in a blend that includes shared ownership, affordable rent, and other forms of tenure. So it can get incredibly frustrating.
My understanding is, correct if I'm wrong here, but my understanding is that viability means that they can expect to make a certain amount of profit back from the development, or it's considered to be not viable. Does the council have any control over saying that that amount of profit is unreasonable, that they should be expecting to make less profit? Or because I think that's kind of,
I think we have recovery mechanisms now and tools which are a lot better. So most developers are working between 10 and 20% profit, and that is sort of anticipated and accepted within the industry. What we didn't have before was the ability to test that mid-development and at the end, and come back to developers and say, actually, you've made more profit than you expected. And through overage, whether we're a partner on the scheme or planning authority, we can recover some of that and see that invested back in affordable housing. We've also extended the principles around affordable housing to small sites. And in lieu payments, making sure that we build more council housing with that. So what we haven't gone on to talk about is all of the council's direct delivery of new council housing and social housing.
Do you think it's reasonable that developers can expect to make 10 to 20% profit on a development they make, given all of the people waiting for homes in Hackney and everything else?
I think super profit is a real challenge. I'm not sure that 10 or 20% profit for a developer is the right level, but that is the established level within the planning system and developers. We can challenge that, obviously, and we do that through the planning process. But I think the real challenge is not enough money for affordable housing and the constant weakening of planning powers by central government.
So in terms of the question about expensive developments pushing, and you're basically saying there's nothing else we could have done. Is that kind of correct? Or
well, I'm saying every time we have found a lever, developed a policy, we've always tightened it to try and embed more affordable housing. So, you know, Dalston Plan, Hackney Central Plan, our new local plan, when we intervene in the market by doing direct development ourselves, you know, we're building at 70% affordable. So I don't think there's a tool that we haven't used or a policy that we haven't campaigned against.
Yeah, you've made the point. Great. Okay, thank you. Okay, so the next question, again, somebody who's not here, I believe. It's from Madeline Laguna. No, she's not here. The question is, Madeline says, when will you take responsibility for the congestion caused by the LTNs, that's low traffic networks, I think, in local communities, and stop responding with the blind blanket statements? I live, she says, between 2 congested main roads and 5 barren side roads have all been blocked. I am stuck on the bus in traffic, late for school and work, as well as vulnerable families' access to appointments and access to mobility has been diminished as no Uber or taxi wants to come anywhere near here, says Madeline. So how do you respond to that?
Thanks, Madeline, for the question. And I know there are deeply held beliefs around the LTNs. I know that the lived experience of people can be positive and negative. I see that, I listen to that, council officers do, my colleagues do, and I think the wider community does. And there's nothing we're putting out that's designed to be bland in any way or give a sense that we're not listening. It's really important that we have underway at the moment a series of open consultations, and we've made sure that that has been publicised far and wide. Some of it is around the strategic principles, some of it is about the exact things you're saying about what it is like to live in an LTN, on the edge of an LTN, or not have an LTN and want one or not want one. Those are really important things that we're talking through and wanting to discuss. All roads are still open and access is still there. So I'm not sure whether people have had conversations about Ubers and taxis, but you know, even in the LTNs in London Fields and Hoxton, I'm seeing Ubers and taxis operating. So I don't think anyone should not be able to get access to taxis. On the bus network, I've talked about already what we're doing. We're working with TfL monitoring bus times. What we have also been doing is saying that we want to monitor independently air pollution, traffic flows, numbers of vehicles and those things. We have some permanent monitoring that's owned by the Department of Transport, some TfL, and then the council's been popping up with 300 different sites. We're about to do that again. Some of it's already underway. We also want to invest in our own monitoring. So we want the lived experience and we also want the data. And we've been publishing regularly now as we've had different sets of data from different LTNs, the impact, and we've seen 40% reductions of traffic within LTNs and small reductions in the number of vehicles on boundary roads. We know that that's been for a set period of time, and obviously lockdown may have had an impact. People's confidence in public transport may have driven more people into private vehicles. So we're going to do that exercise again. And continue to listen to people and look at the design of those individual schemes. But I'm not running away from some of the challenges. I see some of the videos, but I also see some of those streets as a resident, as a bus user, as a pedestrian, as a cyclist, and the occasional taxi user, and they're not permanently gridlocked. And I think the recycling of images, either showing, beautiful, wonderful LTNs and gridlocked roads, doesn't help the debate. There'll be times when those roads are operating well. There may have been an accident. We've had those challenges with traffic lights, junctions. There's also something really fundamental. 40% of traffic in Hackney is through traffic, and
that's people driving through the borough.
People driving through the borough, and not people driving through the borough to work in our schools or visit relatives or drop off stuff to businesses or pick up from businesses. These are people that are just driving through. And we've got some interesting data as well about people that have been caught by our traffic cameras. And the proportion of Hackney residents that have been caught there is less than 20%. So there's a lot more traffic coming through and interacting with our roads, and that has been increasing, and that has been increasing on main roads and these side roads where people live. And we can't go on like that. And I think we've been really clear that we want to make interventions to improve air quality, to encourage active travel, and discourage the use of the car for local journeys. That doesn't mean people should never drive. It doesn't mean we don't want to support disabled people who rely on their cars or large families. All of those things, if fewer people that didn't need to drive were not on those main roads or some of those roads that are still open, there would be more road space for those that people truly need to. And I often think if I drove some of the journeys that I take as mayor rather than cycling, walking, or getting in the bus, I'd be adding to the problem. And I think it's absolutely right that we do everything we can to support people to walk, scoot, cycle, get public transport, and then leave our roads free for those that truly need to use them.
So Madeline's describing those two congested main roads she says she lives between. So you're saying they're probably not congested at all times, and you're questioning whether the scheme has caused that, or we've been monitoring it, but it will be made better in the future. Or
we've been monitoring traffic, and obviously traffic has been increasing in central London and in Hackney at a time when Hackney car ownership has either remained static or decreased.
Presumably not during lockdown, though.
In lockdown, I think we've seen lots of different phases of lockdown. Okay. We've seen the period where obviously there was a harder lockdown and people weren't driving at all. We've seen those periods just before lockdown where large numbers of people go out and do what frankly is natural, which is to go out and buy food, go out and make sure they're stocked up, probably, in some cases go back to their businesses and make sure they're secure. So, there have been different phases of lockdown with different levels of traffic. What we're saying is we're publishing our data.
Yeah.
We're not in any way saying that we're not listening to people's lived experiences.
Yeah.
And there have been a variety of different issues that have had impacts on some of those main roads. Okay.
I'm going to have to wrap that
absolutely.
One up.
I'm sure there'll be other questions on it as well later.
Yeah, and there's obviously a section at the end as well, but anything that was written that's prepared can be given to the questions as well.
Yeah.
Okay, the next question, there's two questions we've rolled into one because they were essentially on the same question, from Susanne Rasuli and David Peat. Have we got Susanne here to ask the question? Or yes, we have. And apologies if I've mispronounced your name. Would you like to ask the question? I think you're muted, not sure if that's deliberate or not. If we can't hear Susanne, then David has also submitted a version of the same question, so perhaps David could ask it. Or if not, I can do it.
Hello, can you hear me? Sorry.
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Oh, I'm really sorry. I've got two masters and I didn't know which one. Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity. I'm actually going to ask you a slightly shorter version of my question, which was rather long. Basically, as a Hackney resident, I really have a big problem with Hackney pension fund being invested in some very, very questionable companies. I think, like myself, many people have been very moved and very angered, very upset. But what's happening in Palestine, Israel? And unfortunately, Hackney Pension Fund is invested in some companies, some companies who provide military equipment to Israeli Defense Force. Also, Caterpillar, which has been used to bulldoze Palestinian homes. This latest crisis was precipitated by the threat of evictions and constant home demolitions, constant attempts at ethnic cleansing of, in this case, Jerusalem from Palestinian communities. We, Hackney Council, invest in Caterpillar, in Elbit, in Raytheon. These are very questionable investments. When is the council going to look into this?
Thank you. Phil, would you like to respond?
Thanks, Susan. I know that this is a big issue for Hackney residents. People have been, I think there's been a petition, people have been emailing myself and the chair of pensions. And I know that whenever there is a loss of life in the Middle East, especially in Israel, Palestine, we're a campaigning borough. People are acute, feel that hurt on both sides. We have a large Jewish and a large Muslim community that I know are really politically active in this space and really care deeply about the lost lives in the occupied territories and in Israel itself. And I've had emails, as I say, highlighting that loss of life on both sides. And I think the images we've seen have been really tragic and really awful. And I hope that this is the last time we'll be seeing images like that, and that actually the diplomatic efforts will start to make a real difference. I mentioned the Pensions Committee. I think it's really important to say Hackney Council does not directly invest in these companies. So as a political act, as if we had some money that we hadn't spent on infrastructure that we had then decided to directly invest in these companies, that is not the case. Some of the people that email me think that is the case. We have a separate pensions committee that takes two things really seriously. It's fiduciary duty and making sure that it is at the cutting edge of what pensions funds do around divestment and ethics. But it always has to be based on its financial duties, as well as looking and working with other pension funds to explore how pension funds could be more activist and how we can do divestment. We also, though, invest in funds. And those funds that the Pensions Committee invest in are the ones that are then sub-invested in some of those companies. So there is a piece of work already underway to look at how we can work with other pension funds to increase the ethical nature of our investments. These, though, some of the companies that you mentioned and some of the companies that people have been emailing me about are complex, large companies that do things in all parts of the world. And I think we have to be really careful about making sure that we politicize the pension fund completely and that we forget that fiduciary duty while making sure that they can explore these issues. And I know they're regularly debated at the pension committee. I don't sit on the pension committee. I'm proud of the work that they do. I know that they've really been hearing what people have been saying, but there is a but. That I think we also have to be really careful about politicising something that is about the pensioners, the future pensioners and staff of Hackney Council.
Okay, just because we have got Susanne on the line. Susanne, would you like to respond to what the Mayor has said with a follow-up question? We've got about a minute left, so just keep it tight if there is a response. You're muted, sorry.
So you're muted. We'll unmute you.
Okay, thank you. Yes, thank you very much. Thank you very much for your response. Yeah, very briefly. Firstly, I absolutely regret loss of life, any life, Israeli or Palestinian, and I absolutely condemn any group, any entity who kills civilians, uses civilian, or basically attacks civilian areas, absolutely, be it Palestinian or otherwise. I just do have a problem with this situation being portrayed as a conflict. Is not a conflict, is an occupation, is not an equal conflict between equals, it's a conflict between, or it's an occupation of a world-class army against unarmed civilians, basically. Although, Hamas is an issue in itself, but, I'm no supporter of Hamas whatsoever, but this is not unequally two-sided conflict. It's an occupation, it's an illegal occupation. Okay, that's one thing. You mentioned the fact that
really sorry, that's pretty much the 5 minutes over.
I'm so sorry.
I can ask. I can certainly ask Phil to respond to that second part in writing. We can promise that everyone who's got a question can have that,
Okay.
and also if you've got a further question, that you can submit that, and they'll respond to that as well. I'm really sorry to cut people off. It's just I think we're going to get through everything otherwise. So, but thank you very much for your question. It's really cool. Okay, so the next question is from Patricia Wheeler. Have we got Patricia on the line? I think I'm hearing yes, we do. The tech people are just sorting out getting this question finished and getting the next one started off. Yep, I can see Patricia there. Patricia, yeah, would you like to ask your question in person? If not, I can ask it for you.
Unmute. Okay, I did send in my question and I will, it's not very long. What is the council doing to help businesses, especially small businesses, pick up again following the pandemic? And in connection with that, the fact that many of them have been badly affected by the road closures brought in last year in connection with ATMs, which are still continuing, that is the closures, with the result of prolonging or preventing deliveries.
Okay. Thank you, Patricia. Phil, do you want to respond to that?
Yeah, I'll split my response as Pat did around business support and transport. Pat is a local representative around small business, so I know that she has been attending some of the forums that we've been hosting with businesses, and it's really important that we have a small but really important function within the council around our town centres and our Hackney Business Network. So Hackney Business Network has been grown and invested in during this crisis to make sure that businesses get the information they need to reopen, be safe, get access to grants. We've paid out over £120 million of different support grants. And look, I recognise that's government money that has been given to local councils to support business. But we've also used that money in really innovative ways to support many of those businesses that at first were excluded from government schemes. So businesses that were caught by their rateable value in business rates. So icons of Hackney, I would say, that found themselves on the wrong side of the borough and forced into a situation where they weren't able to access funding. You've had nurseries and the whole early years sector, self-employed people, subtenants in workspaces. All of those at the start of the pandemic were not getting access to support. And I'm not saying we've been able to help or support everyone, but whenever we've had somebody come forward with a type of business or a situation, we've either lobbied government or we used our discretionary schemes to invest in them and make sure that they are able to rebuild, hopefully, in the future. We're also trying to increase the size of our economic development team. So while it wasn't announced in the budget, we're investing more in our business support services and how we can sustain and invest in the borough. There is a quid pro quo. We want a more inclusive economy, so we'll be asking more of business. But we're also there to help with skills, apprenticeships, the work that we've done around Kickstarter, and a continuing partnership for business and with business. There's also the Zero Emissions Network. And I think one of the challenges that the debate becomes is that green investment, active travel changes, improvements are going to crowd out existing businesses or force people to give up work. Just transition is absolute passion of mine, and making sure that we help businesses with transition to EV vehicles, with local supply chains. We've been pioneering cargo bikes. We've been talking to businesses about the funding that they can draw down to help green their businesses. So making sure that nobody is faced with some of those big existential challenges about how do I operate my business and transition out of carbon intensity. I also do, I said at the start, all of our streets and businesses are still accessible by car, by van and by delivery. And we've made sure of that. And where a scheme was about to go live, where we might have subtly got things wrong, we've talked to those businesses and tweaked it and made sure that we've heard from them. And that is embedded now in the future schemes as well. And I think there is ample evidence from the UK and globally that pedestrians spend more money in local businesses, cyclists spend more money in local businesses, and people that arrive in public transport sustain our town centres. The proportion of our businesses that rely on people driving to them is much lower.
Just in the interest of time, I'm actually going to pick up on. So what Pat said specifically was that the road closures had prolonged and prevented deliveries, I think, rather than people necessarily getting to the shops. So is that something you want to?
Yeah, there were some cases with some businesses off Kingston Road where before we implemented the LTN in London Fields, they wrote to me, they're active in East End Trades Guild, and I put them in touch with the transport team, and it was like, how do we get this right? How do we make sure that you have access? Same with street markets, London Fields as well, making sure that team is fully aware that there can be some challenges here. I think when an LTN or any kind of change goes in first, there can be some challenges about people being routed through sat-navs and things like that. We've been working with TfL, we've been trying to make sure that they have the information they need to update those systems and make sure that people can continue to access, as they say. I also think it's important to make sure that there are parking bays, that EV infrastructure is there, all the things that allow businesses to continue to operate. And I'd want to say to any business watching or any representative of business, do engage with the council, respond to consultation, but also dedicated insight about how people access their business and what would help improve access and where people are having challenges, because there are redesigns still to come. And if the road closure, the filter is in the wrong place and makes it really difficult for a business, there are options around that.
Okay, I've been told that's the end of the 5 minutes for that one. So that actually is the last of the pre-submitted questions. Thank you to everyone who sent those in. Anything that wasn't addressed, if you've got a follow-up or whatever, you can submit it, I think, to the council in writing, just as anyone else can, and that will be responded to. So the second part of this is that we're going to open up to the floor. I keep getting this expression wrong. We're going to open.
Let's say the floor doesn't open.
I was going to say that would be bad.
A bit of a fail.
We're going to open up to questions from people who've dialed in via Zoom. If you'd like to ask a question, please can you put your hand up in the Zoom thing? There's a little button saying raise hand. I can't see if you need to ask a question unless you do that. So I can see there's a few that have gone up already. It'll be the same format. You'll have 5 minutes in total for the entirety of the asking the question and the response and any follow-ups if there's time for that. I think they have. Zoom is telling me the order people have asked the questions in, so we'll just go through that in order in a first come first serve basis. So the first one is from Adam Foreman, I think. No, sorry, the first one is from Hameen Hammer. Sorry, I was looking the wrong way down the list. So apologies if I've pronounced your name wrong. Would you like to ask your question?
Yeah, sure. Thank you very much for the opportunity. I hope everyone is in good health. This is Mr. Hammer from Ridley Road Market. During the pandemic, Hackney Council been amazing helping the community by providing lots of test centers and mobile vaccines. That's really appreciated. We as a market traders and market team done lots for the community also by making sure we have opened throughout the pandemic as outdoor safer than indoor markets. And personally, as Maya knows well, I have ordered a lot of masks from China and selling them at cost price. As currently £1 a box of 50 masks. That's the best masks. They exist as well. 95% protection. So far I sold 650,000, nearly 13,000 packs. Just want to know where's the next AGM and the Civic Award. Also, the improvement for Ridley Road Market as the Mayor of London provided £1 million investment. And finally, the business grant payment for the round 2. When is the final date? Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you for asking that. Phil, did you want to respond to that?
Yeah, Hemin, I know that you've been an absolute hero. I've seen some of the stuff that you've put out in social media, and I think you may have emailed me as well. And what you've been doing in terms of turning your business into one that could sell masks, but provide that affordability in our community. And I just, all of our market traders building on that have done so much during this pandemic. And these have been difficult decisions. There was a time when you would have seen photos of Hackney street markets as a pejorative thing, that they were still open and that they put at risk the population during the stage of the pandemic. And I think what we decided to do quite rightly was to not keep open our more sort of non-essential markets that are more discretionary, but that we would maintain our markets and support for our traders, for those that are providing essential services. And I think I'm correct in saying that week in, week out, Ridley Road never closed. There are very few street markets like that. And thanks to the markets team for doing that, but also traders, you know, they kept going. And I know how hard it was to have a business open when most of the borough was closed and what that felt like. And so just thank you. And I hope that you've been nominated or will be nominated through the Mayor's Civic Awards. And please get back in touch with me if you want to sort of talk more about that and what's involved. We used to have business awards. We don't have business awards in the way that we did. The other bit is making sure that market traders were able to access grants. And maybe if you send me an email, I can understand better which grants you may be still waiting for or what more we can do. We also stopped pitch fees, but didn't put at risk people's pitches. So whether your market was closed or open, we were trying to offer that additional support. And at the moment, obviously, we've had additional testing in Dalston, and today in Gillette, we've been doing the work around vaccines. One of the very last things I did, site visits, was a walkabout last February to Ridley Road. It's a market that is incredibly important to me. We've just announced in terms of our Dalston conversation that it is an absolute anchor to Dalston in our planning policy, that the council will always seek to defend it in planning. We'll continue to invest in it. And Hemin mentioned the GLA Good Growth Funding, making sure that that is delivered on the ground for market traders, for customers, for visitors, for residents. And there's a whole series of changes in investment. And actually, that is a shame that we weren't able to get that all in place, because some of the contactless payments and things that have been COVID-safe business practices are part of that investment. But there's also investment in storage for traders, better toilets for traders, better layouts for traders, and making sure that that market that is the absolute heart of Dalston is protected and invested in. But I could go on and on really about Dalston and Ridley Road, but all of our street markets and traders have done sterling work, and I think people are really pleased to see them. And I was out in Hoxton for the last couple of weekends, and that is a market that is definitely bouncing back as well. And I hear Chats is going from strength to strength. And footfall at Ridley before the pandemic was actually increasing. So we've got to stand with our markets and make sure that they continue to deliver. And we've got the market traders for the future. And one of the projects we'll be launching very soon is building on the work of Nicolette and Gascoigne children's market, and creating more of those opportunities for young people to become entrepreneurs and traders themselves and own their own business.
Great. You've actually managed to do that exactly on the 5-minute dot. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thanks a lot. Appreciate it.
I'd love to meet you again as well. So let's meet on Ridley soon.
Great.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Hemin, and thanks for the answer. So if we can go back to the list of people so I can see who's asked a question. I think the next one was, sorry, we're just waiting. Yeah, it's Adam Foreman, I think. So Adam, if you'd like to ask your question, make sure you're unmuted and turn your video on if you'd like to.
Yeah, okay. Evening, Phil. I'm asking a question for Morning Lane People's Space. What is the current position with the developer's plans for the Tesco site at 55 Morning Lane? And when the options agreement expires in March 2022, would you as mayor agree we should look afresh at the development of the site? And in the light of Morning Lane People's Space consultation survey, consider a development with a comparable size Tesco and 50% of all housing units at council rents? And will you, as the Mayor, agree to meet with Morning Lane People Space to discuss these issues and any future development plans?
All right, thank you, Adam. Phil, your response.
Thanks, Adam, and thank you for the work that you've done on this as part of the campaign and before the campaign, started. And I think I'm right in saying that certainly it felt like one of the last big public events I did at the start of 2020 was a big public meeting on the Trelawney estate about the Tesco development and Morning Lane, and we did about 2.5 hours of questions and debate with a really excellent panel that Adam had helped put together. I was at the launch of I think, a sort of draft version of their report that they've now submitted. And I know there's a sort of petition that goes alongside it. And I think there's some really important messages in that work for the council, but also crucially for the developer to hear, which is people want more local engagement. And I agree with them. They want to have a greater say in what happens on the site, and I agree with them that they think that some of the previous development on Morning Lane hasn't worked. I agree with them, and that they want a development that speaks to the grain of Hackney, and I agree with them as well. The options agreement runs until next year. I don't want to say anything that puts at risk that options agreement and the commercial terms under which it was entered into, because that won't be helpful with any long-term changes to either the options agreement or what might come next. We signed an agreement, which was the right agreement at the time, which was to allow us to buy a site while sharing the financial risk. So we bought a key town centre site and we bought it for the future of Hackney. We bought it to ensure that there was a Tesco. We bought to ensure that it spoke the development to growing employment in Hackney Central. We locked in what we felt was a floor for affordable housing at the time when there was no floor for affordable housing on developments like this. So all of those things were really, really, really important. Ultimately, the option says that the developer must do some of that resident engagement and must bring forward a planning application that is not only conforms to the option, but current planning policy. And if they fail to do that, then there might be a what comes next. The ball is still as it was after the Trelawney meeting, with the developer to come forward either direct or with partners with something that could get planning permission and meets that options agreement. And I'm waiting for that, as other people are. I'm happy to meet with you again, but there's not much more to say. And I do say, as well as a final thing, I would love Morning Lane to reach 35 or 50% genuinely affordable housing. It has to be viable to do that. And the council bought that site with £60 million worth of public money, and that money must be repaid to the council as well. So if the council ended up ever delivering the site, the baseline cost is still £60 million. That will make it quite difficult to deliver the key demand of Adam and the campaign around council housing. That doesn't mean there shouldn't be council housing on site, and as we go through this journey, we want to do more on that. It sits within Morning Lane, within Hackney Central, and as well as the Dalston conversation, there was a Hackney Central conversation. We are starting to publish some of the results of that, and we are also inviting people to join a planning town centre steering group, as we did in Dalston, to co-produce a final Hackney Central master plan, which will help shape both Morning Lane, but some of the other sites in our town centre. So I would also encourage people, businesses, local residents, activists to apply for that and make sure that they're represented in that group, because it has done tremendous work, the version of it in Dalston, in terms of some of the issues there that people wanted safeguarded, like the Eastern Curve, like Dalston's cultural institutions, like its voluntary sector institutions, and like Ridley Road itself. And the quicker we get on with that, whatever comes forward on Morning Lane will have to conform to that Hackney Central master plan, as well as our local plan and its commitments on affordable housing. 20% was only ever a floor. We're pushing for 35. We would love to get to 50.
Okay, thank you. And thank you very much, Adam, for asking that question. That's the 5 minutes up, but as usual, any follow-ups you can submit to the council and they will get them answered for you. Okay, the next person is Raina Tegmeyer, I think. I'm really sorry, I'm struggling to read the Great. Is it Rainer? Have we got Rainer here? And apologies if I've mispronounced your name. You should be in the chat. Yeah, if you'd like to unmute yourself, and if you'd like to turn your video on, please do.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Brilliant.
I'm very sorry, technical problems. Yeah, thank you very much, Mayor. Thank you very much for giving the chance to residents ask a question during the full council meeting in this series of QTs. Very much appreciated. My question is, when the council declared the emergency, they committed to establish a citizen assembly. So my question is, where are we now with establishment of the assembly? So what is the time frame? Second question, or related, what is the methodology to select residents onto the assembly? And the third question, as well related, is, do you plan to have permanent meetings of the assembly, so as a kind of an advisory body and a scrutiny body? So where are we? What is the timeline, and what is the task of the assembly in future? Thank you.
Thank you for laying that out so clearly. Yes, Phil, can you respond to those?
Thanks for your question, a really good question, and I'll do all three hopefully quickly. So when it comes to our accountability on the climate emergency declaration that we made, there's two parts to it. One part was always providing an update to full council, which I think you took part in the full council where we did that last year virtually. A similar update will be made in June and July. That will provide, I guess, the public face of the progress that we have been made, and citizens will see that, they'll be able to respond to that. Absolutely vital that that happens. And then we were going to, last year and the year before, boost our sustainability work in the autumn. There's always been a sustainability day, the fair outside the town hall, and create a citizens' assembly and engagement around that day. We lost it in 2019 due to the general election build up, and last year due to the pandemic. I think we've learned quite a lot about digital engagement during that time. This is one form of it. I think we would need a hybrid meeting in the autumn of our citizens' assembly work. And what we would be really keen to do, coming out of that cabinet and full council report in June, July, is to use the summer to, with a new cabinet member, with me, with officers, to frame what the citizens' assembly will look like. So the camera and you, I'm looking at you and not looking at the camera, but they are different places, to do that work and make sure it happens and that it's productive and that it holds us to account, and it can also co-produce new solutions. I think there's a huge amount that's happened during this crisis that we want to adapt and change, speed up some of our commitments. So our date was 2040. I think on some forms of emissions and net zero, we could move that sooner and really set out what the pathway to those key moments, 2040, look like. I know Lambeth are doing their citizens' assembly, I think, in the coming days. I'm really keen to see how that works. I'm assuming it's online. And making sure, though, that we build something that works in person and works in line. And we want an inclusive process. So I'm really committed as well to making sure that there's a range of voices that reflect the demography and makeup of Hackney. That doesn't mean, though, we turn our back on activists and some of the organised groups. We want to make sure they're fully involved as well. And we'll always seek to engage with. In terms of a permanent structure and more governance, I think it's right that the first assembly looks at that. I'm quite captivated by what they did in Camden. They changed the council's constitution. There's ways of boosting scrutiny, that we could have a standing group. That's not for me to determine, I think. I think it's for citizens to determine. And inevitably, going into 2022 elections, there'll be a range of offers from political parties and civic society around what the next 4 years could look like. Let's get our first one done outside of that pure political period, and let that group, let that assembly set the agenda that then political parties and myself have to rise to. And hopefully we will then have a 4-year structure that holds us to account on this journey to net zero that we know is absolutely vital for the future of the borough and for the future of the planet.
Great, thank you. Again, that's just hit the 5-minute mark. So thank you very much for the question.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And okay, if we could just get back to the list of people. Oh, I need my glasses for that. There we go. Okay, so Maggie Bakir, I think, is next. Do we have Maggie? Great. Maggie, if you could unmute yourself and if you'd like to ask the question.
Yeah, let me see. I'll start the video as well. Hello. Hi, Philip. We know each other from the email exchanges regarding the property 234-238 Mare Street. And as I mentioned in my emails, honesty, truth, and transparency is very important for me. I noticed that the comments below this video is turned off. And I think this is a platform to share all the residents to their concerns or questions about the issues to communicate with the Hackney Council. So I would like to request as a Hackney resident to the comments on to be turned on for this video so people can share their experiences and issues. When we're talking about my question, I have so many questions about this. I was trying to meet you since, we were trying to meet you since, and requesting to meet you since August 2020, since this property was flooded, about the disrepair and neglect in our property. But we were never given an appointment, and you never visited our property, although I've seen you posting on the PR for your PR purpose, probably very positive, happy events as well. So my question is, I've noted down, so we have limited time, so I just read it quickly. A property protection proposal for 234-238 Mare Street between Hackney Council and Global Guardians Management was received and signed on the same day, 24th August 2015, in absence of London Borough of Hackney directors or the person it was addressed to. They did not sign it. It was only signed by GS, who is a surveyor, as far as we know. It was reported in the media at the time, Guardian News, that the bidder was chosen from a tender. But how can Hackney Council discuss, evaluate all the other bids for a tender if Hackney Council receives and signs a proposal from a private company who would bring Hackney Council rent income from the property delivered and on the same day? So the delivery date, the documentation date is 24th of August and the signature date is 24th of August. So it seems like a bit of rush to sign a deal. How is that possible? And why an agreement was signed between Hackney Council surveyor and Global Guardians Management on 24th of August 2015 that makes an unfit for habitation property available to the public for residential purposes under property guardianship scheme. Property guardianship scheme is not to make people live in unsafe or in properties that has remarks of hazards. Health and safety is the responsibility of Hackney Council. Why did the true state of the property hidden from property guardians who live at this address since September 2015? For your information, Hackney Council recently publicly shared a building survey September 2015. And this is when we got aware that the survey has clear remarks about hazards, including the roof leaks, asbestos, rotting, structural errors. We created a website to campaign, www.propertyguardiansact.com. And I would be really happy if you can at least share your opinions with me.
Okay, thank you, Maggie. Phil, do you want to respond to that?
Yeah, thanks, Maggie. We have exchanged emails, and I'm not going to go into all the detail of emails back and forth. And obviously, I know council officers have also responded to you, not always as quickly as you and your campaigners have wanted, and I apologise for that. I have visited the property before. I've been around the property in its entirety. I think it was in 2017, 2016 when I took over as mayor. So I'm familiar with the layout. I'm familiar with the principles around guardianship. And I'm not a fan of property guardianship as a mayor and as a local authority. And I think we've increasingly, during the time that I've been mayor, reduced its use. because there's some real challenges. Obviously, the industry can be challenging. I'm not going to second guess the companies we work with or some of the other companies that we've worked with in the past. But we've made sure that when it comes to residential property on our housing estates, we don't use guardians anymore. We rent those properties out for temporary accommodation. And where you're living, we are using guardians while we developed a mixed-use scheme to bring that building back into use. There are various contractual relationships within the council, the guardian company, and then end guardians. And some of the duties of care are with the guardian company, and some of them obviously are with the council. We're also a regulator, obviously, of health and safety in the private rented sector and in licensing as well. I'm very happy to meet with you at an advice surgery and go through this with council officers. I think it's really important that we do that. But there are some of the detail that you're talking about in terms of commercial relationships, the principle of guardianship. You let out a property in guardian, not an unsafe property, but you let out a property that you're unlikely to let out on a permanent basis, even by license. So they are an interim use. So they're never going to have the same quality around environmental standards, layouts that you would get if the property was being permanently let out. And ultimately, I want to get that property back into use, delivering affordable housing, private housing, and an asset to the town centre.
That's the 5 minutes.
So let's meet.
Yeah, I appreciate there's a lot more to it, but I think the answer there is that Phil, Maggie, you're muted. The time is up, but is there something you're trying to say? We can't hear you. Maggie, you're still muted.
You have not. I was muted, so I unmuted myself. You have not answered my question. How can London Borough of Council discuss, evaluate all the other bids for the tender if London Borough of Hackney receives and signs a proposal from a private company on the same day, 24th of August? And why, although there is a health and safety building risks on this building survey from September 2015, you still rented this property, receiving rent income from the property?
Okay.
I want answer to that. You haven't answered, and you haven't provided the freedom of.
Maggie,
you haven't provided the freedom of information request documents, health and safety documents since August 2020.
It sounds like it's quite a specific issue.
Maggie, I can't answer those questions tonight, I'm afraid.
But Phil has committed to meet you and answer them in person. So let's make sure that happens. Thank you. The next question is from Ollie Adesanya, I think it is.
Yep.
Have we got Ollie here? Should be being invited. Hi, can you unmute yourself and also turn your video on if you'd like to?
I don't know how to do that. Let's have a look.
Yeah. Oh, we saw you for a second. Yeah.
Is that me?
Yeah.
Good evening, everyone, and good evening, Mayor Glanville. I know that there's been some questions already about low traffic neighbourhoods, but there's a sense that this issue has engaged a lot of residents like it has never before. And I wanted to ask again, we've all seen massive increases in motor vehicles during the day on some of the most busy and important arterial roads in the borough, and they've never been like this in the past. And this has made the quality of our lives and the many residents who live on the roads and the surrounding roads, main roads, materially worse, with extra traffic, pollution in and around our homes on a daily basis. This is having a serious impact on the health and well-being, both physical and mental, of residents who live, shop, travel, work, and go to school on these roads. LTNs aren't working in reducing traffic, and they're making main roads a great deal worse. And I think not enough is being made of that. And the flaws in the policy can be seen any time their robustness is tested by any kind of roadworks, like we've seen in Clapton and on my road, Northwold, this week. It is becoming a bit of a living nightmare. Sometimes you're talking about a mile of congestion, which has become an increasingly frequent occurrence. It was never like this before. When are we going to see action to reduce the level of traffic on main roads to at least the level they were before LTNs were introduced? Will the council do more to actively seek the views of all residents rather than favouring, well, as it seems to be the case, that favouring the views of specific interest lobby and campaign groups. Because at the moment, we're seeing some of the marketing material coming from the council seems to be very one-sided.
Okay, thank you very much, Ollie, for the question. Phil, do you want to respond to those?
Yeah, thanks, Ollie. A really important question and an extension of the debate that we had earlier. The answer to all of these questions is reducing car use. We must reduce car use fundamentally on our main roads and on our residential roads and overall. There are tools that we have to do that. Some of them are around, CPZs, car-free development. I've taught Ollie on video before about congestion charges, ULEZs, other things that impact on car use. I think they're all part of a toolkit. Some of the powers I have, some of the powers that I don't. They can feel quite blunt as well. I've been in CPZ debates that can feel quite blunt and debate, but reducing car use is absolutely fundamental. You cannot tackle the issue of traffic by not restricting car use. LTNs do two things. They create zones where people feel more confident in walking and cycling, and they also restrict the use of cars on those roads, but also they make it harder for people, admittedly, even those that live in LTNs, to do those short journeys. Where you've got roads, I know where you live. I'm not going to say to the world where you live, but I know that you live on one of those roads that you feel impacted, and I know that you campaign solidly on that. We are definitely listening and hearing what you are saying and what people that are opposed to LTNs are saying. We, though, do believe that LTNs are part of the solution. So you will see the council saying that. In terms of the structure, the final decision, the consultation results, I'm not going to prejudge all that. I'm not going to prejudge the size and scope and shape of LTNs, what exemptions that we might have, whether LTNs stay or get altered, or new ones get introduced. One of the solutions for the road that you live on could be a bus gate. It could be further restricting of vehicles. It could be the long-term changes to road layouts. We've said we're monitoring it. In terms of traffic, we have seen reductions in traffic both on boundary roads and on LTN roads in the data we've published. We don't, though, have data on every road all of the time. That's why we're investing in 69 new locations, especially on east-west routes where there's no permanent data collection. It's really important that we do that. And what I would be saying to people that your challenge to me is, are we listening? Yes, we are. And we're not just ploughing on regardless, but we do believe that LTNs are part of the solution for reducing motor traffic in the borough. They're not the only solution. And as I say, CPZs, the ULEZ, investing in public transport, all of those things play a part in them as well. But reopening the roads won't take that traffic away, and it won't stop that traffic. So that traffic will still exist.
Part of the question was about when you expect, or if you expect to see traffic levels on some of the affected roads go back down to what they were. Is there you'd like to respond to that particularly?
Yeah, I think we're going to see confidence in public transport return. We haven't made final decisions about the LTNs. We've got the ULEZ coming at the end of the year. We've got further investment in sustainable and active travel. We've got CPZs coming, hopefully after consultation in other parts of the borough. They all have an impact on main road traffic. But there was no impact on main road traffic before we made any of these interventions. There were no restrictions in many parts of the borough around through traffic or short journeys. We have to make those interventions to reduce traffic overall. Reopening roads is not going to solve the problem of traffic in Hackney. It will just disperse it. Those journeys still take place, the pollution still comes out, and the impact on all of our collective health still happens. We must restrict car use and local journeys.
That's the 5 minutes.
That's absolutely critical. But we are hearing you. I see your tweets. I see the campaign tweets. They are important, and they're important parts of the debate. We have not prejudged any of those final decisions.
Okay. I sense there's probably a follow-up coming. We've gone over the 5 minutes for that question, but I think if you've got written follow-ups, the council's promised to answer them as well.
Or 10 seconds, Ollie. Look,
if you want to go on.
10 seconds.
If you want to unmute yourself.
Oh, okay.
He's gone. Okay.
If we have time at the end, perhaps.
Okay, so have we got, can we go back to the list of attendees? Okay, there's no more hands raised. Does anybody else want to ask a question? There's lots of people here who've not spoken. I'm sure some of them would be.
Or anything from the chat if.
Yeah, I mean, we've already had a question from one person, but there's time left, so let's go to follow-ups. Suzanne, hello again. Did you want to continue where you left off before?
Yes, please. Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity again. Yeah, I just wanted to address what you mentioned about the fiduciary duty of the pension fund. Absolutely, I understand that. The UK business guidance on Israel talks about settlement, any kind of economic activity, any kind of financial or economic activity in the settlements or benefiting the settlements are risky, purely because these settlements are considered illegal under international law, and therefore any business in these settlements are subject to disputes, they are subject to conflict, and they will absolutely they are risky, and they're not encouraged by UK overseas business guidance. And many of the companies that we are talking about, the pension fund invested in, they are active in the settlements. Actually, that's the entire reason for our campaign. Basically, we are only targeting companies that are active in settlements. These settlements are not recognized as legitimate parts of Israel. They are illegally occupied according to international law. Any business with them or any business benefiting them are considered risky by UK. From a purely fiduciary point of view, these are risky businesses. And number two, in terms of indirect investments, I also completely understand, but I think that in any case, Hackney, if they have a pension fund committee, they will have some say over how they can direct these indirect investments in any case. They cannot just be absolutely passive about how these pension funds are invested, even if they are invested via investment vehicles. That's all. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Yeah, there's two follow-ups there, Phil. Do you want to go through those?
So they are active in the sense that they have been looking at, you know, I've said on both divest and ethical practice and good governance of companies. Those are questions that are asked by Pensions Committee. I think Pensions Committee is now a far livelier and more open and engaged committee than the one that I once served on before I became mayor. I know its chair takes these issues really seriously. I know its members do, and I know that these debates happen there. It is for Pensions Committee and its members to balance these ethical challenges, the financial risks, and the fiduciary duty. The paramount one is obviously the fiduciary duty, but the other things are really important. I know that as part of the Local Government Pensions Forum, Hackney Pensions Committee and our advisors are talking about some of the issues that you are referencing in terms of the operation of businesses in the occupied territories. And they're keen to look and explore those financial risks. We've made a really clear commitment around divest with the Pensions Committee around looking at the financial risks of holding assets that ultimately will deteriorate in value because of decarbonisation. If we're able to, through that work, make some of the links you're saying, that could be a route to exploring this further. I also know, though, that there are people that don't agree with you just as passionately about the rights of these companies and trading. So I don't want to prejudge that debate, because I have had emails on both sides of that debate. And ultimately, this is not a decision that I make. And I tend not to endlessly comment on decisions that I make, that don't make directly myself. So I think we've heard you. I think absolutely we know that it is a passionate campaign in Hackney, but it has to be seen through that fiduciary duty. And that's awful, because it's like saying that the financial underpinnings of ethic, you know, that they're being traded off. And I understand why that leaves people really frustrated. but ultimately it will have to be a financial decision that explores this issue further. And as I say, we're working with a network of local government pension and regulators to see how we can explore this issue. And also, I guess as good corporate citizens, and I know that there are activist shareholders answering these questions of these companies themselves, and ultimately they have their own duties and reporting duties to account for how equipment is used and the investments that they make. I do find it quite challenging though when big companies like Hewlett Packard are kind of referenced, that you could necessarily completely cut yourself off to some of these big conglomerates and the work that they do, and the size of some of these companies and what they do. And I do also worry that, as I said, that you shouldn't completely be politicizing what is a financial pensions committee around some of this activism. I think because we will then move on to other conflicts and other challenges. That might be the right decision, but that is not what that committee is there to do.
Okay, that's the 5 minutes. Thank you very much for the follow-up. I imagine there's more to say about that, and I'm sure Phil and the council will respond to emails about that. Okay, we've got a question from Alison Herdmayer. Again, apologies if I pronounced that incorrectly. Alison, are you here? If you'd like to unmute yourself and ask the question.
Hello, hi Phil.
Hi Alison.
Hello, you're probably bored of this subject by now, but I thought my opener here is I understand and get the concept behind low traffic neighbourhoods, and I'm not entirely opposed to them. My question comes about a small group of people within Hackney who are most severely disabled, who have physical disabilities. And those people, and I'm one of those, and those people will feel the impact of low traffic neighbourhoods the most, because they have a lot of people like myself have a need to undertake car journeys because they can't walk or cycle more than they currently can do. So with that in mind, when someone does need to do a necessary car journey, for which if you're very severely disabled, most journeys are necessary, the increased journey time means that your life kind of feels a bit worse. I'd be really interested to understand if low traffic neighbourhoods are intended to be rolled out permanently, which obviously we don't know yet, whether the council could implement some measures to mitigate the impact of those increased journey times on that cohort of people, such as exemptions on bus gates, perhaps increased disabled parking in areas such as by our markets, by our parks, etc., where so people might want to visit, so that they'd have confidence that when they did need to make that longer journey, they could park there. And then finally, some disabled people can use cycles to move around. So they can cycle, but they usually need adaptive bikes to do that, such as tricycles or electrically powered bikes. But A, they're more expensive, but B, they can't be stored in the on-street hangars. And I just wondered whether the council could also include some perhaps more inclusive cycle storage to enable disabled people that can cycle. Not everyone can, but where they can cycle a tricycle, for example, they could be able to store it outside their house.
Thank you so much, Alison, for those really good questions. Phil, do you like to respond to those?
Yeah, Alison, really good set of questions, really good set of points, and really passionately made. And I just thank you for making them. And I think, just where you ended off, inclusive cycling, I think is incredibly important, that this doesn't become a binary debate between kind of younger, fitter people and residents that may not have the confidence to cycle, may not, as you say, be able to access equipment, and may rely more on public transport and cycling. We don't want to get into a really polarised discussion that pits people off against each other. And I know the debate feels like that. And I think part of what we're listening to is exactly comments like yourself. I know there are disabled people that really love cycling. We've done some work around that in the past, around side-by-side, some of our work around dementia. And I know that they're passionate advocates for making sure that cycling infrastructure is not exclusive. And that is storage, that is the way that bollards work, the way that drop curbs work, the way that the finance around those cycles work. And I think Part of the solution is making cycling more inclusive by having infrastructure that allows those things, because cycles that carry children, cargo bikes, and those trikes and other things are incredibly important. I think we should do more on that. I don't think it's the only solution though to what you talked about at the start, which is people that live in Hackney that are dependent on the car, either because they have caring responsibilities for somebody that needs extra care, or they get their freedom through driving a car because they've got a disability themselves. I really care about that. I'm really passionate about that. And I want to find a way that we can hopefully, during the next stage of the consultation and engagement, respond to some of your asks around exemptions and changes that can better accommodate disabled people in some of those essential journeys. I don't want to make a new policy announcement tonight because it needs to be done in a structured way. There are obviously some legal cases in Hackney directly and beyond that have also been looking at these issues. So I've got to be careful what I say, but I absolutely hear you. And I think we need to make sure that it feels fair and that your voice and the voices of disabled people in Hackney are sort of fully heard in all aspects of the debate. And the last bit, I know people are signalling to me that my time is up. The equality aspects of all of our infrastructure is something that councillors Woodley, Williams and Coban are working together on. And that is everything that we do around how our pavements are designed, our play areas are designed. You mentioned our parks, and making sure there's nothing that we do that, for the best of intentions, excludes people and embeds that exclusion in infrastructure. We get it right on school streets. We've been talking to some of our school transport providers. We've been talking to other care providers, but I know that you want to be independent. People want to be independent as well, and they're not always accessing formal care in those ways. So all of that is firmly in the mix, and there will be changes ahead. I just can't say tonight what they are, because of announcing policy in this way is probably not the right thing. But I just thank you, Alison, for saying that. And I think it's a continuum of what the other contributions have been making. All too often, I think, people feel that we've settled and that this is it. I promise you it isn't. But we do believe in some of the things we're doing, but we're not bloody minded about it, honestly.
Okay.
Thanks, Alison.
Thanks, Phil.
Thanks, Alison and Phil. Have we got any more people with their hands up? Yeah, we've got, taking my glasses off again, which isn't very helpful. We have got a question from, I think it's Terence Jeffrey. Are you here? Yes, do you like to unmute yourself and ask the question? This, I think, timing-wise, this will be the last one, so make it a good one. But you'll need to unmute yourself first.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, Terence.
So, hello, Phil. Just a quick question, really. I just feel like I've been hearing about the comments about the LTNs and so on and so on. People that pay for a permit to park on the streets, I feel like they're being penalised in the sense that they can't move their cars to drive anywhere. And I just want to know, I mean, seriously, you're talking about like people trying to reduce the traffic on the roads, but yet you're taking money off people for parking their cars on the street. And I just want to, I can't see the logic in that. So could you explain to me where the logic comes from? Are you trying to actually reduce the cars on the road, and are you telling these people get rid of your cars, or are you just using that as some sort of cash roll to basically, I don't know what it is, if it's to fund the Hackney Council or to fund the streets or whatever it is. Can you explain that to me? Because I just don't get it.
Okay, thanks, Terence. Phil, what's your answer to that?
Thanks, Terence. A lot in what you're saying, and to give it a proper answer, I'm going to bounce around all the different things that you've raised, because I'll start with CPZs and where the income goes. The income from CPZs can only be spent on transport in some forms. As part of it is used to implement and enforce the CPZ. All of the CPZs in Hackney, over the generations that they've been introduced, have had some element of consultation, engagement, and a citizen demand to introduce the CPZ. And they're regularly reviewed with residents, both people that have CPZ permits and those that don't. And that's on hours, design, bays, all of that, size, and those things. That's incredibly important. They're not top-down impositions from the council, but I do think they're an important tool. They're an important tool in two ways. They restrict the amount of cars on our roads and they prioritise residents first in parking. So if you go to any other borough that doesn't have CPZs in inner London or parts of Hackney that don't have CPZs, there's virtually no regulation. That makes junctions less safe. It means that there's all the stress of driving round and round and round and trying to find somewhere to park. So I do believe in CPZs. They're not some great cash cow for the council though. And we do invest all of that back in transport related projects. And that includes, by a roundabout way, things like the Freedom Pass and our contributions to that, because it all comes out of a central transport budget that we put in place. CPZ also, and this borough's changed a lot, and I used to be a Shoreditch councillor, and people used to come to me and say, how can you let all this development happen? Where will people park? Will they crowd me out of the car parking that I do on estates? The only way to stop that is car-free development and a CPZ. And that can be quite controversial because people move into a development and go, why can't I park on the street? But we've taken a conscious decision to say no to that. So the CPZ is a really good tool about prioritising existing residents and their expectations about being able to park outside. We've used emissions-based interventions as well with CPZs. We've also prioritised EV vehicles. So, Terence, it's not my job to make an individual decision about whether someone keeps or gets rid of their car or even buys a car in their first place. I want that car to be as small and green as practically possible, and I will continue to invest in the infrastructure of the borough to make sure that people that need vehicles can transition to more sustainable vehicles. But I also think that we should be reducing car use, pooling car use, but we don't, the income that we get from your CPZ permit or even the vehicle excise duty I mentioned earlier, the amount you pay as a driver is not consummate to the amount that we get as money that we can spend on our roads for any purpose, or that the Mayor of London gets through TfL. So it can feel like, and I've heard the debate, I've knocked on the doors, that you're paying for CPZ, you're paying for insurance, you're paying for fuel duty, you're paying vehicle excise duty, and then someone's closed off your roads. I get that, but we're maintaining access. We don't want to make life any more complicated than it needs to be, but we also really do believe in reducing those unnecessary journeys. I come back to Alison though. Alison would define what is a necessary and unnecessary journey for herself, and she clearly did do. And so those of us that can make that choice in transition, making it makes more road space available for people that do need it. And we all, I have a driving license. I do occasionally drive a car. I don't own one. I always say we're multimodal. We'll get lifts from people. We'll need a taxi. Making sure that all of those things can happen is incredibly important. And it's not some great endless war on the motorist. I promise you, Terence.
Okay. Thank you so much for that. That's the end of the 5 minutes. That is, I think, the last question we've got time for. Really grateful to everyone who's submitted questions either in writing or by asking them tonight in person. Just once again to say the council has promised that everyone who's submitted a question will get an answer. If you've got a question that's not had time to be asked, if you've submitted it in writing, the council will respond to that. They have pledged to do that, and obviously this isn't the only forum you can ask questions in. There's also email, there's the council's got a Twitter account, so do make use of those. Thank you to Phil for answering these questions, and yeah, thank you to the...
Just for viewers, we can't see the pop-up chats and things like that, so people may well have said bits and bobs during the course of the debate. We've only seen the stuff that people have verbally said to us, so if you're frustrated in the chat and Q&A, apologies, but I think obviously people have had the full chance to put up their hands and ask questions, and I really thank people for being involved. This will stay permanently on the council's YouTube channel, and I hope with Ramsey or another chair, we'll get to do this again, because I think it's been a really great discussion.
Perhaps even in person next time, who knows?
Yeah, in person.
Thank you very much, everyone, and thanks for the invitation. And I think that's the end of the session.